Welcome to the Dark Nook shop. This is my toolbox. There are many like it, but this one is mine. In this video, I'll be taking you on a tour of my toolbox. In the top compartments, I keep stuff that I don't really use very much, like a bag of action figure legs and hands. I use these for reference, or if I need a hand fast. I'm not above cannibalizing parts for a build. And here's some creepy little cabochon eyes. And some realistic eyes that are actual size. Sometimes it helps when your sculpt has realistic eyes. You can build your sculpt around the expression of looking in a direction, and that's much easier if you have eye blanks that can actually look in a direction. So this is just the stuff I rarely use. A few old texture stamps, a lot of needles and sharp pokey things. Those are always useful in sculpting. Always isolate your sharp pokey things though. Nobody wants to get stuck by a rusty needle while they're rummaging around in the box for some pliers. Now, let's look inside the box.
What's in the box?
Inside the box are tools I use more often, but still not that often. But most of these tools are backups and spares, or tools too big to fit in the smaller kit. Like this comb is very useful on a big sculpt, but I really don't do that many big sculpts. But I still like to have it around just in case I do. As a sculptor, I have two kinds of tools: purpose-made tools and found object tools. Like this poor man's rubber tip tool. When I was in school and I was broke as hell, this was really useful. It's a click pencil eraser that notches out of a pen-like housing, kind of like a utility knife, and I just cut the tip to make it a wedge. And now I've got a cheap, effective sculpting tool, and I can change the shape of the tip if I need to, at any time. I think these were in a 3-pack for like $1.50 at a back-to-school sale. Now, some of these tools are in this part of the box because they're redundant, meaning I have another tool in my kit that's basically the same tool that's in my mini kit, which we'll get to in a minute. I also just have some random bits and parts to fix tools in case they break. This is my armature wire bending tool. It's a weird little multi-tool for bending armature wire. With this little guy, you can easily bend armature wire into just about any shape. It comes with these little metal pegs, and I really wish it had some kind of magnet to snap these to its housing, because they're notorious for getting lost. But with these pegs and these holes, you can create leverage and pressure to bend the wire in just about any direction you need to. Now here's another great found tool. These were skewers for olives in a martini. They're perfect tapered triangles. Awesome for wrinkles that need to go from small to large as they sort of fade out. It's a great tool. And it's a found object tool. I found it in my martini. Most of my bigger tools are in here. A rubber mallet, armature wire, more armature wire, lots of armature wire, wire cutters and pliers, a big plastic scraper, and a bunch of paintbrushes. This is an old school cheese cutter from before everything was made of plastic. It's perfect for cutting slices off of blocks of clay. It's probably the oldest thing in my kit. Now this is my baby. This little box holds all the tools I use the most. This is my kit within a kit. This is the essentials, the small little kit I grab and go. First, texture stamps. I use a lot of texture stamps. This little woven bag had plastic Easter eggs or something in it, I don't even remember. But the weave on the bag is perfect for making snake scales, and you can stretch it to make them bigger or compress it to make them smaller but retain the shape, so you can create a really accurate scale pattern that scales from smaller to larger. Lots of paintbrushes. Paintbrushes are really useful in sculpting. So much of the fine detail work and smoothing and texturing is done with paintbrushes. Then there's some purpose-built wooden sculpting tools, a plastic tube roller, good for rolling out clay and smoothing over clay. It's also good for punching circles out of clay. Your basic wire loop tools. I have a lot of wire loop tools. These are embossing styluses, little round metal ball tip pen things used for embossing. These are amazingly good for pour texture on larger sculpts and finer details on smaller sculpts. Then there's more texture stamps, and these texture stamps are from different foams, perfect for zombie skin or wound texture. And these are lava rocks for a fire pit and a resin copy of a lava rock. These make great skin texture for reptiles or monsters with lumpy, pebbly skin because it's the negative of a pebbly skin texture. Now these 4 ball tools came in a 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐞 polymer clay kit from Amazon. I made a video reviewing that kit. The whole kit was $16. I'd pay $16 just for these 4 tools. They're really good. The metal is solid and heavy. It runs all the way through the handle. They're not cheap knockoffs. These are really good, sturdy tools. These are similar tools. Balls on one end and rubber tips on the other. They're good. They're not great. Surprisingly, the metal balls from the cheap kit are actually better, heavier, easier for sculpting in material that might give you a little resistance. Then I have a lot of wire loops and rake tools. Some of these are made from guitar strings. Some of them used bandsaw blades. All different shapes and sizes, bent into different curves and different shapes. Some of these were made by a company called Ken's Tools that makes great tools. Some of them were made by me. Then there are some tools like this one. They came in a cheap kit. It's kind of junky, but it's actually a decent tool. The cutting edge on this is really nice. It's a nice flat wedge tip, and on the other end it's a little pointy stylus tool. These are dental picks. Surprisingly useful for tiny details and wrinkles, and ironically, or maybe not ironically, for sculpting little tiny teeth. Now I made this little wire tool for making skin texture. It's just like a wire brush stuck into a copper tube. This is a spatula tool. Many uses for a tool like this. One of which you saw in my last video was making fingernails. Now, I have these crazy hook tools. Honestly, they don't really have a use other than just looking really cool. I rarely use these for anything, but I just love the way they look. They look more like tools for making a mummy than sculpting. But I keep them in my kit. Just, who knows? Who knows when you might need a mummy nose hook? Then there are my scrapers, in assorted shapes and sizes. And these are probably my favorite repurposed tools. These are nut picks from a nutcracker set, like this one. They have a pointy end, but it's not sharp. It's a smooth pointed tip on one end and a rounded or flat smooth tip on the handle. Plus, a great texture on the handle too. And here's part of the nutcracker that came in the same package. And I took a pocket clip from an ink pen and attached it to one end. This tool is great for smoothing. It's my secret weapon for thin edges on appliances. Now these are manicure tools, cuticle pushers. Some flat, some pointed, different degrees of quality, slightly different shapes, but these are all for doing your nails. These are manicure tools, but they're great for all kinds of sculpting applications. And now this is just an old nail, just a nail. You'd be amazed how useful a nail is in sculpting. Here, I'll show you. When you start to sculpt, you start to look at the world around you in a different way. You start to see shapes and textures. You start to see tools where nobody else would see a tool because you see a texture, or you see a pattern, or you see something that would be useful in an application that nobody would have ever thought of using that thing for. When you walk through the world as a sculptor, you start to see the world around you in terms of potential. potential to create a shape, potential to make a thing, or to make something into something else. The creative kinetic energy of things. And that's what I love about sculpting, is that you can look at something and see things that nobody else would see, because you see the potential of what something can be, or what something can be used to do. And that's a magical way of looking at the world around you. These are my crochet hooks. These came from a multi-size pack of crochet hooks, but it had been opened and like 2 or 3 were missing. So I found it in the discount bin for like 50 cents at Michael's. These are the best sculpting tools for smoothing and rolling clay. The smaller ones are even good for fine detail, and the big ones are really sturdy, so you can really push some clay around with the bigger ones. But the end-all, be-all tool in my toolbox is my all. This is one of about 40 leather tools from a cheap kit off of Amazon, and it's easily my most used and useful tool. You can see me using this all in almost all of my videos. It's that well made, which is amazing to me because it's such a cheap piece of Chinese crap, but it's actually really good. There's not a surface on this tool that isn't useful. From smoothing with the sides or smoothing with the handle, making eye holes with the handle, poking holes with the tip, sculpting with the tip. It's like a fine point pen, but for sculpting. It's so useful. Well, that's my toolbox. Thanks for checking out my video. Like, subscribe, leave a comment.